Welcome to vanofaction.com, where we're taking our 2018 Dodge Promaster van and turning it into a family camper. And today we're talking about one of the most important parts of van living, having drinkable water. This is our Berky Water Purification System, and you can take water out of a mud puddle and make it drinkable. Let me show you how we built it in here. As a person who doesn't do an awful lot of drinking of water, unless I'm using it to improve the taste of scotch, and even then it would only just be a little bit, I'm really not much of an expert about it. But I do know that when you're on the road, having access to a really reliable source of good water for cooking and drinking and making ice is really important. It's absolutely important. And we had planned on being in our van full time, and on the road, it's not always possible to be able to rely on finding sources of good drinking water. So we built into our design a water filtration system. Not a sales pitch, but we chose the Berkey because our research told us that it was the most reliable system available. It'll take any kind of water and filter it out. They say it's good for 3,000 gallons of water, which is a ton of water. And people say like years you can use it without having to change the filters. And it'll take out heavy metals, it'll take out particles, it'll take out chemicals. It takes out 99.9% of everything. You can put tap water in there if you find a hose bib and you're not sure of the quality of the water, you can put it in here. But you can also take water out of lakes, water out of rivers. They say you can take water out of ponds and it'll end up being perfectly drinkable and clear when you're done. The way you test it is, believe it or not, you put food coloring in the top and it will stop the food coloring from coming out the bottom, so they say. So we bought it, and on top of that, it's really an attractive piece of furniture, isn't it? The logical place for the Berkey would be on the kitchen counter, maybe close to the sink, only they're really tall. We got the big one, and it has to sit off the counter in order to be able to get a cup underneath it. The lid even has a handle. I don't have it on yet. So it's really big, and there's a limit to how small these top cupboards can be, and they stop being functional. At first, we thought about putting it over here, but that just wasn't working. And so we've made the decision, and you may have seen it in other videos, to move it into the galley side. And when it's over here, we'll be able to have the spigot back behind the line of the cupboard so it's not in the way of anything, but still have enough room to be able to get a pot or a cup under there to get water when we need it. It'll be excellent. And then when it comes time to fill, the whole unit can lift out, come over, and then be able to fill it up and put it back on again. It'd be great. My challenge now is to make it so that, as attractive as this is, and it really is a beautiful piece of equipment, and it's going to look great in this little space that we've built for it, but I've got to try and find a way to make sure that, as beautiful as it is standing still, it stays the same as we drive down the highway. Brackets that I've hollowed out the back side of that I can sit over top of each foot. So then I'm thinking that if I can just anchor this top part against something, it should be good to go. We should be in fine space. Now, I've seen people do it with like a bungee cord or like a tie of some sort, and that would certainly be fine. But what I think I would personally rather do is make up a wrap, and I think it would kind of cool. If I could get something on here that looked like that was cedar, maybe there or maybe up here, that was going to hold it steady while we were driving, and it would have it match the cabinets. And then when we wanted to stop and we needed to fill it, we could take this off and then lift the whole unit out, take it to the sink or wherever we're going to take it to fill it, and then bring it back over, put it on here. As long as this base is anchored, it can't fall off of that, and then be able to put this back on again somehow. I think that would be really cool. That's going to be the first experiment. Let's get started. This is the first attempt at trying to get the piece of wood to wrap around that Berkey. I think that's going to look amazing if I can just pull it off. But the first thing I had to do was find some cedar, and this has to be air-dried cedar, not the kiln-dried cedar like I used throughout the whole van build. And the difference between the two ways of drying I explained when I did the ceiling initially, and at the end of this video, I'm just going to take that chunk of the first video and just splice it onto the end of this one if you don't know the difference, because one makes the wood more stable. I need air-dried so that I can still work with the wood and change its shape. So I had to scrounge around and find some cedar. that would work for me. This is air dried. I know it is. It's just something I found in the scrap pile. And yet it has to be clear, which means there's no knots. You need a nice straight grain, no knots. Then I cut 3 thin pieces, and these pieces I soaked in a cookie sheet in boiling water for about 20 minutes. I'm just kind of making this up as I go. And then you see it starts to work. See this? It starts to bend. And if you do it while it's still moist, you can work it. You have a window of time to do this. Now, I want to try and have this take the shape of the Berkey, but wood has a memory. Wood springs back. So the first thing I have to do is get this wood when it's wet, and when it's wet I can't glue it because the glue dissolves in water. So I have to bend it and let it dry bent and then glue it together. So step 1 is to get it bent and bend it wet. So what I've done is I found a paint can. Now this paint can is a smaller diameter than the Berkey by a couple of inches, which is what I want, because I know once it's dried, it's going to spring back. So I want to bend it more than I think I need to right now. So my first shot is going to be trying to get these strips of wood around this paint can nice and snug so they will dry. And I'm doing this in real time. Let's see if I can. I'm going to do this in real time. We'll see if it works. I don't know whether it's going to work or not. I don't see why it shouldn't. Oh, it's going to work. I just want to get to it. Oh, look at that. Look at that. Okay. Holy schmolies. I didn't think it was going to be that easy. So now, that's fantastic. Look at that. Okay, let's take it. Let me show you this. So I have those 3 pieces that I just soaked for a few minutes. They're just kind of just jammed in there, and it's over clamped. Now I just have to let that dry for probably the day. We'll move on to another step. Here's a pro tip. You know, I've got working on this round Berkey cylinder. I have to make my bracket. It's going to be round in a couple of areas. I have to find the center in 2 or 3 different directions. And there's an easy way to do that. Finding the center of a board. This board is 8 and 13/16 of an inch long. So now what is the center of 8 and 13/16 of an inch? I mean, who even knows that? So here's a cool little tool you can pick up at a hardware store. It's called a center finding ruler, and you'll notice on one side it's a 12-inch ruler starting from 0 going to 12. It isn't 0 at the end, and it isn't 12 at the end, but it starts at 0, goes to 12. On the other side, though, the 0 is in the middle of the ruler, and as you go out from the middle in each direction, the numbers get larger. 1, 2, 3. So in this case, you could measure this side and say, well, there we are. It's 8 and 13/16 of an inch. I have no idea what the center of that, what the middle of that is, or what half of that is. But if I line up all I have to do now is make each side the same. This is 4. That's 4 7/8. Bring it this way. There's 4 1/2 on this side. 4 3/8. 4 3/8. And this is when you start going, oh boy, it's 4 3/8 plus a little line, plus a little line, right in the middle there. Boom. That's it. Easily done. There is the center. I didn't do any math in my head at all. It's nice when you don't have to think too much. I have set the Berkey up on the floor of the van, and I'm using the side of the cabinet as a way to hold the back. The unfinished seater there, that's the back of the back panel. It's fitted. It's going to go in just fine, but I'm not sure where it has to go in terms of front to back. And this way I can actually see how everything's fitting together on the side. So this will be a nice little setup. I've got the black collar made up with a little bit of foam weather stripping, so it fits in there nice and snug and soft. It's all parallel this way. That's ideal. Now, just to make sure I've got this done right, I want these little feet right here. got this foot to go on, but at the back here, it's a little bit off. See, it's too close. It's not going to work right. So I have to trim that piece. I'm going to show you how I'm going to mark that really easily. Okay, now, I've always been a person who believed in thinking as little as possible. I've spent my life trying to find ways to think as little as possible. And this is one of those situations where I need to cut off the corner of this little boot. And I could spend hours trying to figure out exactly how to do that. But I know that this whole setup I have right here replicates exactly the way it's going to be when I install it. One thing that I've done is I've made sure that the distance from this part of the stand to the back is the same on both sides. I don't want the stand to be twisted in any way. Now that I'm satisfied that's the case, all I'm going to do is very gently slide the back up a little bit and put the boot in. And put the other side on. Then put it back down again. And that's going to tell me exactly how much and where to cut. Bingo. Now if I slide it up, I can take that off. Take that one off. And a simple trip to the miter saw, the cutoff saw, and look at that. Boom. Didn't use a tape measure. Didn't use a calculator. I have two chores left before this part of the job is finished. The first is I have to determine how far back from the front of the cabinet the blocking has to go for the back to screw to so that it ends up being in the right spot. And so I'm going to do that by measuring from the front. First thing I'm going to do is put down a piece of tape because I don't want to put marks all over my floor. And then with a square, I just have to slide over to the spout, put a mark on the floor, and that will be the front of the cupboard. I'm going to push the spout back a little, about maybe a 3/8 of an inch further, just so you don't catch it as you walk by, but otherwise that's the last thing I want to do here is make sure I have this bracket in the right place in terms of being up and down. So I'm just going to check the squareness with a little square. Looks good. There's no right or wrong to this. By my design, I want to come in just above this roll so that my band comes around below the decal is the idea. And that looks good right there. So now I'm just going to put a mark. That's all I need to know for now. I'm going to center this bracket right to left. I don't know if it is now or not. I'll sort that out. And I know I want this to be level across, so I'll just take a square line straight across. That bracket can go on right there. Okay, we're back, and it's turned into summertime, which is really a treat. I've got the Berkey set up and braced up and mocked up exactly how it's going to sit in the van. And this is the wood that we put around the can almost a week and a half ago now. I soaked it, bent it. Let's have a look and see how it's going to work out. Okay, so I want to put this on. I'm going to take the clamp off and check it out. Isn't that sweet? Didn't spring back as much as I expected it to. It did spring back a bit though. Let's have a look here. Take one. Oh, that's going to be great. That is going to be just great. This is starting to come together as an idea. I had initially planned on expected to have this run over top of this piece of the bracket, but it opens up too much in here. I don't like the look of that. So I'm going to try and, the plan's changing, and this band will stop here, and I'll figure out some way to make that connection. I'm not that far. But when I look at this is a piece of air-dried cedar that I found on a scrap pile. And I guess I could have used any kind of air-dried wood now, because when I look at it, the grain of the band is so tight. It was an older tree. The grain here is much looser, and I want this is representative of everything that's in the van. So I'm going to cover this piece with a piece of older stock. Now, I want to do that anyway. I had to have air-dried stock in order to have it pliable enough to bend around the corner like this. But I can take some kiln-dried stock that's more in keeping with the look of the grain pattern of the van. And if I cut it thin enough, it will still bend around. And I want to do that because right now, this piece has a lot of spring in it. This piece over time will straighten back out again. But when I laminate two pieces together on the curve, it won't happen. And this is why. Two pieces of wood that are together on a curve, if they straighten out, they slide against each other. The outside one has to travel further than the inside one in order to be straight. Just like you see when a parade's going around a corner, the inside guys don't step as much as the outside guys. But if I stick these together, they can't move against each other. They won't spring as much. So I'm going to laminate these together. The biggest part of the curve is the air-dried stock, but with a really thin piece of kiln-dried stock, I don't have to get it wet. It'll just bend around the curve. So that's what I'm going to do now. Because I don't want this piece to move, I've got to make sure I get lots of glue over the whole surface. This is just going to be one of those strip of glue. I got to spread it out, make sure I get good glue everywhere on both pieces. It's going to be kind of messy, but that's just the way it's got to be. This thing needs to have good glue coverage. Way up, all the way down, on the edges particularly. It's important. There isn't really an easy way to do this. It's important to be done right and to get good coverage. That one. At one time, I worked for a company that we made big round columns for Harry Rosen's men's stores to wrap their steel columns in the buildings with. And we had molds to make hollow round veneer logs, I guess, for lack of a better word. And it's amazing how once you put two pieces together, how well it holds its shape. It was just phenomenal to me. I'd never seen that before. It was just amazing. Okay, now I've got good glue on both sides. So now I'm going to take them, put it together, line up the ends so I get the right length. Good. We're going to slide back and forth on top of each other a little bit for now. Now I've got this clamping arrangement set up so that I can get it around my mold, which is just my can of paint. Here we go. Around my can of paint. And I have a strap so I can pull it tight. You see, I've got a good, those two are nice and tight together. Not very hard, just a little block to hold it back. And my packing strap. Now let that sit for a couple hours. This has been sitting in the mold now for a couple of days. I've had a couple of other projects on the go and took a short road trip over to Lillooet, British Columbia. So don't go adjusting your sets. I picked up some new old coveralls over there. Lillooet is mile zero of the Great Canadian Gold Rush. And so I figure some gold miner must have had these. So out moiling for gold. And I thought, well, who knows? Maybe I'll find myself some gold dust in the pocket. So far, nothing, but you never know. Anyway, let's try and open this up and see how it's going to look. I really gooped the glue on there, so it might be a little bit of a challenge to get it off the can, but we'll just see. You're seeing this in real time because, there we go. I wanted to show it to you just the way it came on. There's that. Take that off. Now here comes the fun part, trying to get it off the can. Should peel off pretty good though. There we go. There we are, right there. Check that out. So now that now has a memory. So I stretch that out, it comes back again. That's fantastic. Trim the ends off. This is good. This is going to look really good. That's what we have so far. I'm not completely satisfied with it, but it's coming. I'm going to hide this little guy, and this block is much bigger than it needs to be, but I didn't know that at the time. Let me give you a closer look. On this side, I have the elastic. It's stretched out a bit. I've just made out a couple of clips. I'm going to be able to hide that with a little bit of cedar, I'm sure, so you won't see it. And on this side, I used a piece of fir because I wanted something more dense than cedar. And this is how this works. This is the first effort. If I push, let me show you this. If I push, and here is the Berkey compartment completely made up on the shop floor. The two sections slide into each other. The top one slides into the bottom one, so only the top one needs to be anchored. And I've done that this way. On this side, I have a piece of elastic that's under tension. A little bit of a space there. This is the piece of wood that I bent. A little bit of a space there. And in order to get it off, all one has to do is push the round wood this way a little bit. Let's see if I can do this with my left hand. Switch hands. Push it this way and lift. And it's locked on that little pin. And I have a piece of metal in here with a hole in it. Once you put the Berkey back in place, it's just a matter of rearming the elastic on this side by hooking it up on the bracket, coming around on this side, and just sliding it over top of that hook. Snap. And now that's not going to come off. I think that looks pretty swanky. Can't wait to see it in the van. Here is the installation without the Berkey. I got the backboard screwed into place. The feet are anchored down with some nice brass screws so they look good. Anchored solid as a rock. That's not going anywhere. And then the bracket, you get a better look at it. And this guy just slides up, comes off, stretch the elastic, goes back on again. And there it is installed. Really turned out well, fits in really nicely. Really happy with this. Hope you found it useful. Give us a like, a share, and a subscribe. And watch these other videos. You're going to find those useful too. Cheers now.